Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze Sevilla defender Jules Kounde and break down how he can improve Chelsea's backline. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, first we're going to analyze how Sevilla do set up their 4-3-3 or at times a 4-2-3-1. Then we'll look to see how Kounde is able to operate in that system, focus on Chelsea and see how Kounde could slot into their starting lineup, and then we'll analyze his strengths and weaknesses. So what you now see from the Sevilla side is that they are in a 4-3-3, but when they do look to attack, they intend to push the fullbacks higher up the pitch. They have the wide players looking to shift in a bit narrow. And then in that midfield zone, we have Fernando or Gudel dropping off deeper in between the center backs or sometimes on the outside of the center backs to form a back three. This is what allows Kounde and Diego Carlos to push forward into advanced positions. And in terms of territorial dominance, both Sevilla and Chelsea were at the top three of their domestic leagues. Sevilla averaged the second highest possession rate in La Liga, and that was at 61.2%, just behind Barcelona. And then when you look to Chelsea, they averaged the third highest in the Premier League with 61.4%. So you often see the opposing side dropping off into two banks of four, a 4-5-1, or at times even a 5-4-1. Regardless of the case, you have Diego Carlos and Kounde with the opportunity to push forward into higher positions. And from that, what you end up seeing is that Kounde is a very good passer in terms of breaking lines and playing those penetrative passes. And there are times where you end up seeing the wide player, let's say it's Suso, dropping off deeper to drag out the left back. And then it encourages the fullback to push forward in Jesus Navas, and Kounde's dumping balls into that right channel, or looking for the runs of the center forward to make runs into that zone. This is an example of Kounde carrying the ball into Celta's half, and you could see Suso dragging out the left back, and Jesus Navas making a run off his marker into the right channel, and Kounde simply punts the ball to get Jesus Navas into an attacking position to create for the forwards. On the other hand, when he isn't pressed, he has the time and space to play switches of play out to the opposite flank, whether it being to the left-sided attacking player or the left back pushing forward. But what we end up seeing from Kounde that he's often renowned for is his ability to push higher up the pitch. Whenever space is available, he does look to push forward as they do form a three-man backline, and Fernando and Diego Carlos should be providing cover. But what you end up seeing is that he does attack that space, but he doesn't really offer much of a threat in the final third. There are occasions where he does play the ball out into the wider areas and makes forward underlapping runs in search of possession in return, but that pass often isn't played, and there is the rare occasion where he is able to evade challenges to break forward on goal. But for the most part, when you do see Kounde in those advanced positions, it is because space is afforded to him, and he rarely offers a significant threat in that final third area. That is largely down to his teammates' inability to play the return pass or their inability to retain possession. Here you can see where Kounde should be receiving a layoff, or his teammate should be, and this is the good of Kounde and the issues he has at Sevilla. When that layoff is played, it's a bit short and it presents Kounde in a potential 50-50 with the Alaves midfielder. What Kounde does well here is that he gets to the ball first, and he's able to hold off the pressure, and he could simply play the ball back to his teammate as that is a safe 5-yard pass. But what he ends up doing is that he spins away from that pressure, and as he looks to face that Alaves goal, once again he can play the ball out to Alex Vidal. But what he ends up doing is that he carries the ball forward, and that's where he sees an opportunity for a penetrative pass. Neither of the Alaves midfielders ahead of him are set, and they aren't looking to close down that pocket of space, and he plays a forward pass in towards the front line, but when that pass is played, his teammate ends up losing possession. Here you can see Sevilla's advantage in that 3v2 against Athletic Club, and Kounde looks to push the ball forward in towards their own half, and that's where pressure is applied. But what Kounde does well here is that he continues his run forward as the pressure is half-hearted, and as he steps towards their midfield bank, that's where Kounde looks to play a forward pass rather than playing the ball out towards the wide player. You could see that the gap of space is very tight, but he's still able to split that midfield bank to get the ball towards the front line. As you could see, the pass is successful and his teammate receives it, but once again from that position, they end up losing the ball. Here you could see Kounde carrying the ball into the Alaves third, and he has En-Nesyri and Suso as his options going forward. Kounde looks to play the ball into the path of Suso, and Suso plays a square pass into En-Nesyri, and that's where you end up seeing Kounde looking to make an overlapping run down the right channel. When Suso plays that squared pass into the path of En-Nesyri, he ends up taking a touch backwards and the ball is poked away, and that halts Kounde's overlapping threat. From a defensive aspect, he does a very good job of being proactive and tracking runners who are looking to overload the center of the pitch, and there are times where you do see him following his markers into their own half to apply pressure to ensure that they're unable to turn and run at his goal. Another key trait to his defensive superiority is his ability to deal with 1v1s. And when he's placed in those scenarios, he may not initially win the tackle, but what he does well is that he doesn't concede the center of the pitch or allow the opposing attacking player to get a shot on goal. He'll force them wide and concede a poor cross or block the cross into the box. Or if he does allow the player central, he does enough to block them off the ball or force them to play a square safe pass. Here you could see Kounde in a 1v1 in left half space with Moi Gomez, but focus on what the Sevilla defender does well here. Rather than allowing him to get a shot on goal, he ends up forcing Moi Gomez towards the byline, and what he does next is that when Gomez does look to carry that ball to deliver a cross into a dangerous area, Kounde does well to get a foot in to ensure that it doesn't happen. From a Real Madrid attack, you could see Casemiro in the final third looking to shift the ball out to Benzema as they have a 2v1 against Kounde with Vinicius. When the pass is played into the path of Benzema, you could see Jesus Navas recovering his position to make it 2v2, and look at Kounde's positioning here now. Benzema wants to cut onto his right foot to get a shot on goal, but Kounde doesn't step in, and that's where he's able to get his body across Benzema to ensure that he can't get a shot off, and from that position he's forcing Benzema to play the ball backwards or attempt to play a square pass across goal. Benzema attempts to play the square pass and it's loose and Sevilla win possession. And on top of that, although Kounde is undersized, he does a very good job of winning aerial 1v1 duels from either side of the pitch. And when you look at it from an offensive standpoint, whether it be from a set piece, he's able to present a legitimate goal scoring threat from a corner or a free kick. Therefore, when we focus on Kounde's main defensive trait, it's mainly his ability to identify danger and then cover ground for his teammates. You often see Diego Carlos or the fullbacks occupied, and Kounde is able to read the movement of the wide opposing attacking players or the attacking midfielder or second striker that's making a deep run from those midfield zones to try and break in behind for a pass. Here you can see Eden Hazard picking up the ball from a deep left-sided position ahead of Suso, and Kounde is tracking the movement of Benzema as they're looking to play a quick 1-2. Hazard plays the ball across Suso into the path of Benzema, and that's where you see Hazard making a run off of Suso, and while Kounde does a very good job of ensuring that Benzema can't turn, he's aware of the threat of Hazard making the run into half space. When Benzema lays the ball back to Hazard, Kounde instantly steps out and he applies pressure. He makes it a 1v2, and then he steps in for a tackle and he forces Hazard to play the ball back to his left back. Here you can see Trigueros on the ball ahead of the midfield bank, and he's looking to shift the ball out to Moreno as you have Baca occupied by Kounde and Jesus Navas. However, Trigueros opts to shift towards his right, and that's where you see Gerard Moreno from a deeper position looking to make a forward movement just ahead of the center backs. There's a huge gap between Kounde and Diego Carlos, and that's where you end up seeing Trigueros shift the ball out to Pino, who drops off into a central position, and that pulls out Diego Carlos, and that's where you see Moreno looking to make a run into that center back gap. Pino's aware of it, and he plays a reverse ball across Diego Carlos, but Kounde's aware of that movement from Moreno in a deeper position, so he shifts across laterally and he tracks the run in towards half space, and he ends up winning possession. There was a time against Madrid where Modric was carrying the ball into the Sevilla half, and focus on Benzema dropping off Diego Carlos, Vinicius in that halfway circle, and Kounde. Modric plays the ball to Benzema, and you could see Vinicius making a run between the midfield bank, and he's looking to dart in between that center back gap as Diego Carlos follows Benzema. Benzema lays the ball off to Valverde, and Benzema's movement pulls out Diego Carlos, and that's where you can see Vinicius continuing his run in between the left back and Kounde, but Kounde tracks that run well, and he follows Vinicius stride for stride. It blocks off the passing lane for Valverde, and it forces him to shift central, and it halts the attack. So where Sevilla didn't play in a three-man backline, now you have to question how Kounde would fit in at Chelsea. Well, like I said earlier, when they do attack, they often do shift into a three-man backline with a defensive midfielder dropping in between the center backs or towards the outside of them. So if Chelsea wanted to persist with their three-man backline, this season we've seen Christensen, Azpilicueta, and Reece James play in that role. But what you get from Kounde is that, like I said, he's able to push forward to play those forward passes. He's comfortable in that space to provide an overlapping or underlapping run. And then his ability to identify danger and cover for his teammates is an additional bonus to a Thomas Tuchel side that improved defensively when he was hired, and it ensures that Azpilicueta and Reece James don't have to play in that right center back role. And if there was a weakness in his game that you can highlight, what you can say about Kounde is that sometimes he remains flat-footed and he doesn't track the movement of his runners. It is rare, but it does happen. And there were times where Sevilla were defending higher up the pitch. He made the wrong decision, or it was a systemic breakdown where he wasn't tracking the movement of his runners, and they were able to get him behind and force him into a mistake that often led to a goal. Here you could see a Villarreal counterattack with Diego Carlos not tracking the movement of Moreno dropping into the midfield zone, and Kounde and Jesus Navas tracking the movement of Baca. When that Sevilla midfield bank is bypassed, you see Diego Carlos dropping off Moreno, which means he can run at goal. And now you see Baca making a run between Navas and Kounde. If neither center back steps, they have to track the movement of Baca to ensure that the pass isn't played. But Kounde doesn't do that, and when Moreno splits the two center backs, you could see Baca already getting ahead of Kounde as he breaks towards goal. Baca does a very good job of brushing off Kounde to get onto the ball, and that results in Villarreal's second goal. From a Celta attack, you can see Caracol and Nolito dragging out Navas and Jordan, and Kounde should be aware of the movement of Iago Aspas, who's calling for the ball between the center backs. When a forward pass is played into the path of Nolito, he instantly looks to wrap the ball around Jesus Navas, who isn't tight, and you can see Iago Aspas now making the run off of Kounde. That ball should be swept up by Kounde, but he doesn't get to it in time, and he allows Aspas, who's making the run off his shoulder, to get just ahead of him, and from that position, because he doesn't win the ball, he's now faced in a predicament where he is chasing Aspas breaking into left half space, and from there he ends up fouling him to concede a penalty that is converted. So as you could see, Kounde's reliable center back role at Sevilla is easily transferable to Thomas Tuchel's tactical setup, and his ability to identify danger and consistently cover for his teammates makes him an asset to Chelsea's backline.